Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Show Up with Camron Gran. I'm your host, Camron Gran. As a reminder, I'm not a therapist. I'm just somebody going on his own mental health journey, giving you guys little tips and tricks that you guys can try. Hopefully, if you've learned anything from this podcast, it's just to advocate for yourself, which is more of a journey of self-exploration where you figure out what works in your own brain. Because when you can figure that out for yourself, it makes life just a little bit easier. Now, today I thought, since we all just got over the holiday, and we're getting into the new year, we're making our resolutions, we're trying to start out 2025 as best as we can, even though a lot of crap has happened and it's only 12 days in. I wanted to break down an episode of a show, and it's actually a show that's recent to me, although it's been on for 3 seasons, but it was just a really big surprise. The show is called The Bear, and the episode I wanted to talk about is called Fishes. It's season 2, episode 6, and it's an episode that anybody could watch because it literally takes place before every event that you've seen in the show, and it's kind of, I think, one of the best episodes of television I've ever seen, and that's saying a lot. Anybody out there is familiar with August Osage County, or if you've watched Dinner Party from The Office, like the way that this episode of Fishes is written is like, I think, a masterclass in the tension that rises under the surface in like family scenarios. Because the major reason why it's called Fishes is because it's a celebration of Christmas, and they're breaking down like 7 fish dishes because of, I know this is something in Catholicism with 7 fishes, or maybe because my friend is Italian and I think his family also does this. So I don't know if they're Italian or if it's like a Catholic belief, but it's basically like over the course of Christmas, you prepare 7 fish dishes to serve to honor the 7 fishes that were present for like the birth of baby Jesus. It was never part of my upbringing, but I was just very interested in more of the mental health dynamics at work. Because at the end of the day, this is a DBT podcast. I do try to break down as much as I can those scenarios, but I think the what I want to showcase with this episode is I think a really good example of what's happening under the surface of what's being said. Because if we didn't look further into what people told us, then you have a mother who's just stressed, who's trying to cook her food. Like, that is really what she says she's doing, and that's why she's stressed. But then at the same time, you have her 3 children, who are afraid to approach her because of the way that she reacts, and also, there might be a drinking problem, which is why her Dawn is her name, and she's played by Jamie Lee Curtis. And her daughter, his name's Nat. And throughout the episode, you see her constantly trying to like remove whatever alcohol is in the house. So like without telling us that she has a drinking problem, they're like showing that like her kids are preparing themselves to just, be ready for when that like escalation of being not only an alcoholic goes on the same tier of what could be underlying mental health issues. Because throughout the show, Nat is the only character who's kind of trying to check in with people, and you can tell like talking about your emotions is definitely something that's not like acceptable or well met in this family, because every time she asks, people get more and more upset because she keeps asking. And I will say like pestering maybe is what I'll give them for being irritated with her, but there is something I would do something like Nat is doing, which is if you tell me you're good and then you're like acting your normal self, then I probably won't ask you again how you're doing or if you need anything. But if you're like on the verge of what feels like a mental breakdown and you're telling me that you're good, but you're not giving me tasks to help relieve your stress, especially because Jamie Lee Curtis is kind of an older woman, and so like the amount of stress she's in doesn't feel healthy. And like as a child, I also would be concerned for my mother in this scenario, because it's one of the main dynamics, because you have Nat, who's kind of the only child who's around her mother a lot, and then you have one son who manages the restaurant, The Beef, so he's present, but he also is going through his own stuff, so he's kind of separating and not really opening up to people. And then you have Carmen, who her I think the youngest child, who is so obsessed with becoming a chef, he kind of left, and he does similar to what Gordon Ramsay does over his chef journey, which he went to like France and then Copenhagen, or I don't know if he went to France, but he went like, it's basically when you like tutor under very like prominent chefs, so that way when you develop your abilities as a chef, you're learning from masters. It is a fellowship that you can join. I've heard of this because of other shows, and also Gordon Ramsay's talked about it on F Word and like some of his other shows where he's just talked about how he trained as a chef. And so like but Carmen, instead of facing up with like the underlining mental issues of his family, is using his talents in cooking to kind of avoid what's going on with his family, with himself. Because while you could watch this episode without watching anything else from The Bear, there is somewhat of like a reflection on the past, that like when things are emotionally hard to address, he withdraws or he runs, kind of, because like things were blowing up with his mother, and then he ran away to New York and then also to Copenhagen instead of like facing up to them. And I will say, like, I understand this mostly because my own dynamic with my mother. I did not know originally that she was using. I had other things, like I thought things were happening at home that were like more like danger, or like, you know, things that as a child you can help with if your parent just opens up to you about. But it's harder to help somebody with their addiction because usually they won't talk about it. And if you can't talk openly to me who doesn't have an addiction, that's when like there's no trust there. Like because I've talked to my sister who is still alive because my mom passed away from an overdose. And really the only benchmark I've ever expected from somebody is I'm more willing to like jump all the way back into a relationship with my parent or my sibling who has this kind of like addiction that she's dealing with when she's talking to me about it, because I think I am somebody who needs communication to have a relationship of any kind with anybody. If you can't communicate with me, then it makes it hard for me to push through boundaries, especially because not everyone is as comfortable talking as I am, and I recognize that. But like, if you're not comfortable talking with me, but you're allowing these things to bubble under the surface, and then they're either exploding in our faces because you would rather yell at me about something that you're making a bigger deal than it is, rather than addressing the real problem in the situation, or you're, you know, doing things that are worse for you. I think that I have also fallen into the trap of like asking somebody and then them getting upset at me because I won't let go of me asking whether or not they're okay, because they don't want to admit what's going on with them. And I've brought up the show Mom, and I've broken down that on this podcast before, because while that show is a sitcom and they make like they do turn addiction like funny. And what I like about that is not that like, oh, it's funny so it's okay. It's more of like, oh, I've done this and I accept that. But like, now that I'm no longer in it, I can acknowledge as somebody who is an addict how like ludicrous some of my thinking was. And I can harness that reality into making better choices for my life today. But like, if you can't even admit what you've done or like acknowledge like your own actions and stuff, it's harder to like develop a relationship of trust. Because like, I cornered my mom and I had facts ready when she was before. I had to corner my mom with my siblings to get her to admit to us that she was using. But because she would not tell me if I asked her directly to her face, I had to find evidence for her to confess to me. And that's why it was hard. And then, because like, if my mom had just spoken to me about stuff, like my mom was hanging out with my sister when she was before she passed away, and my sister was still using, and like a thing that is like a what if but like doesn't hold any merit because I can't change the past, is like, if I'd asked my mom, maybe she would have been honest about like using again, but I didn't, because I was trying to give her like freedom to hang out with her daughter, not knowing that they were kind of using together. And that's kind of something that I think about when it comes to this episode of The Bear Fishes. It's like everyone in the family knows that there's something in the underneath that nobody wants to address, because they're all trying to put on the show of what Christmas is supposed to be. You're supposed to like have presents. You're supposed to be happy for each other. Like there's a character who's pregnant, and so they're also trying to not cause her stress. Like there are all these excuses to not address what could be a very hard, emotionally negative thing. And one of the big things that the first episode of The Bear talks about, so it's not a spoiler, but but it is another underlying current for this episode of Fishes, is like their older brother eventually like takes his own life, and they're trying to piece together why. And like I just said about my mom, he was also using, and so like, but he's not telling people. And so you have moments where like Carm is trying to connect with his brother Michael, who's played by John Bernthal. And then Jeremy Allen White is who plays Carmen. And they're trying to connect, and he's like, because Carmen has this big dream of opening his own restaurant called The Bear. And so he's like created this outline of what the restaurant would look like, and he's sharing it with his brother. And it's a very sweet moment, and his brother is excited for him, but you can tell, because like while he's being confessed to, that there's this underlying emotion at work. And I just love the subtext of the show. It's like I had to look up the Emmys, because to me, if you could watch any show of television ever, I think that The Fishes, this episode, is one of, if not the best episode of television I've ever seen, because there are so many games at work. And I call it a game because it's like your subcontext and what's happening. It's like, so when you watch stuff, what the actors are doing is like it's kind of what they're working and what they're trying to show you. And then there's subcontext, is like what they're truly playing when they're saying these things. Like, sure, like Carmen is confessing to his brother Michael that he wants to open this restaurant, and he's sharing that because he looks up to his brother and he wants to have this thing with him. And his brother is looking at the same thing because in that other episode, Michael's talking about the fact that like he gave up on ever having a dream because he accepted that he was the one that had to have responsibility. Like dreams and good things were not for him. Like they're for his siblings to have, so that's why he supports them. Now, they haven't said that that's specifically his reason for doing it, but that's like something I put into place because I've seen a lot of the show. But it's like he's so proud of his brother for having this huge dream and wanting to start this restaurant with him. But at the same time, he's looking at it, and you can see that like there's something that he feels like he's lost along the way, that like he doesn't know if he can gain back enough to do this with his brother. And then while this is happening, like you have a lot of the other family dynamics at play. Like so many master actors are in this episode. Like I was not prepared for Sarah Paulson to show up. I was not prepared for like I know he's from Breaking Bad, but like he wrote the Van by the River like SNL sketch. He's like a big name comedy actor, and I was not prepared for him to be Donna, who is Jamie Lee Curtis's husband or ex-husband. I wasn't sure what they were playing with. But like you have also at the same point, like you have this father figure complaining to all like the other relatives who aren't directly in the home about Michael's failures and basically calling him a loser, and like unabashedly doing this in front of an entire table of people, so much to the point where like Michael's like throwing forks at him. And like this is a build up because earlier in the episode the dad threw a fork at his son, and so like you have these tensions like roiling up under the surface that like lead to this huge explosion at the end of this episode. And I looked up whether or not this episode earned Emmys, and it did. And then I looked up whether or not like Jamie Lee Curtis won an Emmy for the show, because I loved Everything Everywhere at Once, because to me it felt like people were finally giving Jamie Lee Curtis like opportunities to like actually showcase all her capabilities as an actress. And so like going from that to this show, I was like, oh my goodness, this woman is just so brilliant at acting. And like you see all these like dynamics at play with relatives, like because like I think everyone forgets sometimes when you watch television is like most of the time, a lot of these actors on this show are not in other episodes. Like, you don't know Jamie Lee Curtis is the mom until you get to this episode of Fishes. And then you see her, like, embody that and have these deep relationships with these people that she's meeting for the first time for this episode. And that's kind of what I was, like, blown away with, is, like, you just got that this was a huge, like, family that gets together and chaos ensues, but they also have a real deep love for each other, but they also have a lot of mental illness in their family, but because they're all people afraid to talk about things that are hard, it just boils under the surface. And so you don't get how bad it is until it gets to those extremes. Like, at first, you think that Donna is just having a stressful night cooking. Like, it's just about the cooking. And then you see her system of cooking, which is, like, setting timers, like, 5 minutes apart and not labeling them. So then every time that the timer goes off and she's getting drunker by the minute, she just is exploding and being like, oh, I got to do all this stuff. And, like, she's, like, complaining, like, why is nobody helping her? But then when they try to help her, she yells at them. So it's kind of like... You set yourself up to not let anybody give you what you're looking for. And that's something that I really like that was explored through this episode, is Donna feels like none of her family loves her. But then when you watch the show, like, you see all these characters trying and then immediately her lashing out at them. And so when she starts complaining that nobody loves her and nobody wants to jump in and do, like, the hard stuff that she asks, it's not true, because we've seen them try, but she's so lost in her own narrative that she doesn't get the reality that's at work. Because John Mulaney plays, like, the husband of either a sister of Donna because Sarah Paulson, I don't know how she's related, but she's not one of Donna's children. But I think she might be an aunt, because that's why she tells Jeremy Allen White, who is Carmen, that, listen, your family is very toxic and you need to focus on what you need to do to get to your dream. So I have a restaurant in New York. Please come to New York so you can stay on that path and focus, and I will support you doing that, rather than getting lost in the sauce of a lot of people not addressing what's going on with them. And I think that's very beautiful. It's like, my dad kind of gave me a similar speech where he was like, I know you care about all these people, but they're not doing the work to A, support you, or B, when you are around them, they're more like trying to get you to solve, or like, I don't know, the show Things We Do in the Dark, it's a show by Taika Waititi, and there's like a vampire called like an energy sucker. And I said that a lot about my family, where like they aren't trying to solve a problem, they're trying to steal your energy for themselves. Like they don't want to actually solve a problem, they just want to take up your energy. And I am somebody who, like, I need communication and compromise, because those are the things that I think lead to a better understanding and a better state of being in your life, and not everybody wants that. And you can't have open communication and actually get that stress relief if you're more focused on yourself or like your stressors, rather than getting to the root of what the problem is. Like, Donna feels like nobody's helping her, but she's not telling them that. And then, like, she's not recognizing it when they're trying to help. Like, sometimes people try to help us and we don't see it because it's not what we need. I almost sometimes wish when somebody asked me to do something for them, if I sat down and said, hey, well, you asked me to be like, to have more communication with you, but what I think is more communication, you don't respond too well. So when you ask me for better communication, or like more like talking, what are you looking for? Like, what is the like type of communication would give you what you need, if that makes sense? Like, I don't need texting. And the reason why I don't need texting is because texting sets my triggers off, because people have used texting as a weapon against me, because they're texting. It's like Donna, instead of asking her family for help, will just crap on them and then say, you're not helping, if that makes sense. Like, you're not like asking for help. You're just trying to like stress dump on somebody. And then when they want to help you, you don't actually want them to help. Or if they do help, you want them to help while knowing how crappy they are as a person. And that's definitely like how texting has been used like against me in the past. Like, can you do this? Can you give me this? Or like I'm somebody who is very open and like easy to yes, but I need you to ask me up front. Like, for instance, I drive rideshare. I drive buses also. Sometimes I get it. Like, we all have these stresses in our life. Sometimes we can't afford something. And I wish people were just upfront about not being able to afford a bus ticket. Like, if you can't afford it, just tell me. Like, I can't tell you how many times people are just like making up stories or trying to blame the app that's used, as though the app's the problem, not like them not being able to afford it. Like I'm not a judgy person. Like, if you need a ride somewhere and it's very important to you, just say, I can't afford a ticket. Can you still take me? It's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know why we lost like the ability to ask for what we need. And like, I feel like so many of us just assume answers nowadays. We're not like allowing the real person in front of us to give us an answer, if that makes sense. Like, we think we know how people react, so we just don't ask, or we ask while assuming the worst. And I'm just not about that. Like, I get why it's hard for people to give me the benefit of the doubt, because I have a reactive face and my face does not always match my emotions going on. And so sometimes people think I'm going to blow up at them because that's what my face is giving, but my mind is not doing the same thing that my face is doing. So like, people feel very judged. And I've told them, please, if you ask me something, don't judge what my face is doing. We have talked about the fact that my face is not a good benchmark. I like, my face is the emotion happening, and then my mind is like how I think about what you asked. It's like, this is how I can help, or how I would solve this situation. Let's forget about my face, because my face is my face. It's gonna have its reaction. I can't control that, but I can still, as a person, figure out how to compromise and come to a conclusion with you. And that was the huge thing that they were building up with Donna, is just the fact that she wants things from people, but she's not actually letting those people guide her to a better solution or the stress relief that she's seeking. It is funny to me that like Donna makes this huge deal about asking for a minute once the food's done and the table's set. She asks just for like a couple of minutes just to calm down, but like her son's there and he's like, please just come to the table. And she's like, no, I need a minute. I'll meet you there. But she's like really down and depressed, and like you can see that on her face. And Carmen's just trying to push her, just be like, no, it's okay. I'll wait and we can go together. But she's just like insistent and kind of like daring him to go against her. It's very toxic, to be honest. And I think it's a masterclass of the danger of toxicity. Fish is the episode of Bear. And it's just, I don't know, it's so rich to me. And it felt very vivid and reminiscent of my own home life with my family. And like, because we've all been in a situation where we're trying to compromise with somebody and work with them and show them that we care, but they're like daring us to like step over the line so they have an excuse to like attack us. And so eventually Carmen does leave, but then she's over there steaming, and then at the dining room table, like you now have the dad basically calling Michael a piece of like, you know, crap, worthless, not going to amount to anything. Like he's really, it's shocking to me the amount of toxic words coming out of his mouth, and there's 10, 11 people around this table, and not one of them are telling him to stop or like shutting down the conversation, because he like they moved away from it, but then it just kept coming back to this. And then this is when like John is like throwing forks, and like the biggest tension thing that like they almost dives into a fight, and then he says, if you throw one more fork at me, I'm going to come over and deck you. And so that's about to happen, and then everyone's afraid of Donna. And so that's when Donna enters, and they both kind of end their whole little spat. And then they're all just trying to be good for Donna, who you can just tell has been around and there's history. And she's the one that you got to look out for when it comes to like holidays. Like if she's happy, everyone's happy. But if she gets mad, the entire night's ruined, and you better pray that you go home with as little damage as possible. Like you can just tell that. But the issue is there are people like me who it's very hard to tell a lie and not tell somebody the truth. And so John Mulaney is asked to give like the prayer before dinner. And he really is doing a good job of like telling, because he's like a guest to the family. He's married to somebody, so he's not like part of the main family dynamic. So he's trying to like show Donna how grateful he is for all like that's been done. And then he's like thanking those two people for not going to fistfights. He's like saying how much he appreciates being part of the family. He's trying to do what any person I think would do to like try to diffuse the tension, which is just telling people that on a holiday, you're just really grateful and you love everybody in the room. And you want to like support that, and you wish people could just sit in that for a minute. Like, let's just remember that we all love each other, and despite what's being said, like, let's forget about it and let's just dive into what we all love about each other and like focus on that. And that works for a second, and then Donna just hears it, and then somehow that drives her own things over the edge. So then she explodes and then leaves the room. And then now that we have Donna, who would destroy all of them out of the room, the royal intention that was part of the show comes back, because now we don't have the one everyone's afraid of. So then now we have that dynamic exploding, and then she leaves, and then finally Mike throws the third fork at his father, and then it dives into a fist fight. And then you're like, okay, well, things are just going to go crazy from now on at this holiday party. And then the last thing that you expect is that, Donna left because she was upset, and then she came back. Did she come back in a very fruitful way that was going to like benefit everybody? No, she came back in her car and she just crashed into the building, which is a choice. I don't know what she was seeking from that, but it definitely is a way to like, if you're trying to stop two people from fighting, driving through your home in your car is definitely the way to do it. I'm saying that facetiously, don't actually do that, anybody listening. But it was just like, what is happening? And then you just see all this stuff, which is the past, and then the beautiful last shot of this episode is it's Jeremy Allen White, and you hear his brother yelling, you hear the horn from his mother's car, and then you see him focus in on these, they're not churros, they're eclairs, and he's looking at them, and there's like this fork stabbed through them, and you just see him trying to like bury like the trauma that's happening in front of him, because to me it is the freeze response. If you are somebody who leans on freeze heavily, you recognize it. It's like, I can't process this. This is crazy. I don't understand why we're now here. I tried to be good with my brother. I tried to be good with my mom, and things are going on with them that like any amount of help when you're healthy in your mind wasn't going to help them. So you have to have that degree of separation, but like it takes time to know that like if somebody isn't receptive to your help, it's not your fault, but you have to have done the work to realize that. And it's just, I find it so beautiful because it plays on the just the dynamics that happen at home. Like, there are so many things that go on when you like meet your friends and family. Like, history is a part of it. Like, sometimes you go home and it's like you're back to being a middle schooler or high school, depending on who you're around. And it's beautiful sometimes, and sometimes it's not. Like, there are people that I don't ever want to see or meet again, and it's because they said things about me or things happened with them. And instead of, again, talking to me or trying to explain what's going on, because my brain at the time didn't understand why I was losing friends or why people that I thought were close friends were like turning against me, I don't want to see them because of what they did to me when I thought that we were close friends, if that makes sense. Like, I don't need them to explain it. I just would rather not have them, be a part of my life anymore. And I didn't used to feel that way about family. Like, I used to be somebody who believed in like family stick together because you love each other. Like, and love, I actually am somebody who used to believe growing up that like unconditional love was a thing in family. And then as I grew up, I realized I am sending so much unconditional love to all these people when all their love for me is conditional, it's transactional. And if I can't give them the transaction they're looking for, I have no merit to them. And that may not be when you talk to them how they talk to you about it, but like their actions speak the opposite of what they're saying, if that makes sense. That's why I realized that like actions do speak louder than words. And even though, because I will not tell somebody something that I do not mean. Like, if you're like, Cameron, you're talking rather like cagey, it's because my brain will not tell somebody I love a lie. Like, if you ask me a direct question, I'll try to answer it as truthfully as I can, but I won't give you a direct answer if my emotions or what I think isn't direct. I will try to say it as well as I can without hurting you, while also trying to like show that I care. And it was an unhealthy thing for sure. And like through DBT, I learned that degree of separation and how to be there and be better for my family. And so this episode, I definitely think that if you have family trauma, or if you're trying to understand like what I like, just the way that DBT or like communication can have, like if you don't have those things, like the dangers at work, because I think what DBT grants somebody, especially me, is it's like instead of emotions just happening to you, you're like in a room and you're like, oh, this emotion is flaring up. Let me make sure like through these like the circumstance I'm in that what I'm feeling is warranted in this moment. If it is, we'll check yes and go with it. If it's not, we'll check no and we'll go against what I'm feeling. But I have that like moment of processing before reacting. And I think that was very freeing. And it's also like, oh, you have that moment and you have this TV you're viewing your emotions through. And then you're like, is this person somebody I care about? Like, should they have power over me? No. Like if the answer is no, then it's kind of like it just bounces off force field. Love is hard because when you love somebody, they have more, like, unfortunately they have more power than you want them to have, but it's because you care about them so much. And I'm not going to cancel that out, because I think that you should have people that you love and care about that much. But it's also about, setting boundaries up front so they know what your expectations are. Because otherwise you're just playing a game that nobody wins, because you can't learn to communicate with somebody if they don't want to do that work with you, which is a hard lesson to learn. But yeah, that's it for this episode. I really hope that you will go to season 2, episode 5, Fishes. It might be episode 6 of The Bear, and watch it. Again, if you're into acting, if you're just into good television, it's so amazing, the nuances and tension and like payoff. I can't even tell you. It's just, I haven't seen television like it in a long time. Like, it beautiful. Like, I can't. I want to say I can't even tell you again, but like I'm speechless, because I feel like I walked out a changed person, and I did not expect that from an episode of The Bear. It was really fun, even though like there's a lot of hard issues. It's like you're on this journey, and a lot of the journey feels familiar, And so a lot of the maybe the dynamics you don't have an opportunity to address in your family, you can get it out through this episode, because that is why I felt like it helped me. But no matter what, I do hope that throughout this week, as we're decompressing from the holiday, I know January is usually like the moment we forget about whatever happened over the holiday and New Year's. I'll just like take a moment this week and just remember, like, it's okay, take a breath, and that it's important to make time for yourself, because when you do that, you remind yourself to show up for yourself, because you matter.